I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. My sobriety date's April 8th, 1989. And how we're going to start this meeting, we're going to read the set-aside prayer. You guys are going to need this by the time the weekend's over. If you kind of listen to what it's saying, we're looking for a new experience to this thing. So, thanks, Brady.
Steve, alcoholic.
Steve.
When I was early in sobriety, I used to go into meetings and my head was all be buzzing from the stuff that was going on during the day, and then I'd have a whole bunch of expectations about the meeting, and I couldn't accept some of the things that were being said, and then I was listening to a speaker and heard about the set-aside prayer. So you can join me. Just I'll say the prayer. You guys can just think about it. And it goes like this. Dear God, please set aside anything I think I know about myself, about my disease, about the big book, 12 steps, the program, the fellowship, the people in the fellowship, and all spiritual terms, especially you, God, so that I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me see the truth. Amen.
Amen.
And then I can listen.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. I'm going to give you guys the sheets. We're not going to go through them tonight. I'm going to go through the kind of principle of it or the design of it, and when you're on your own time, you can go through it when you go back and you have a rough idea on the roadmaps. You ever walk by one of those travel agencies? You see pictures on the window, kind of, wow, that looks nice, that looks nice. It gives you a rough idea where you're going. You have a picture of it, but you're not there yet. That's what we're going to do this weekend, right? We're going to give you pictures of what it looks like. Some of you have experienced those places. We want to enhance it, right? It's like the first time you visit the place, you don't really get an idea of everything there. But then when you meet people, say, well, this is here, that's there, this is here, and it enhances your whole experience, right? And that's what this is really all about. It's about an experience. A lot of us have knowledge of these things, and we have ideas about these things, but the experience of this thing is really different. So a bit about myself. We're going to go through this, and one of the things we're going to do with those sheets is tonight, when you go back to your room, I'll give you a pen. And you're going to just do an exercise on the back of the first sheet. So on the back of this sheet here, the first one, it's a blank piece of paper. You're going to write down what the problem is. What you think the problem is. How many people has relapsed here? Then you're going to ask yourself, the next question is, why? Why did you relapse the last time? And that's only personally for you, right? So when you go back over your story, you're going to write down what you think the problem is and why you relapsed the last time. These two things here, I had no clue of. I got introduced to AA. My first meeting was in 1978. I was 16 years old. Everybody around me thought I had a problem. And I was in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. So it took 11 years before situations presented itself where a member of Alcoholics Anonymous 12-stepped me into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what they ended up doing was conning me into the process outlined in this manual. And this manual is my lifesaver. So if I was going to if I seen people drowning, what I'd want to throw them is a lifesaver, right? I wouldn't want to get in the water with them, because what happens is that we both end up drowning. So there's a process put together. So what I'm going to do is talk about my experience, talk about what made the difference in my experience, and what has me standing here today, 29 years later, right? So like I said, my sobriety date's April 8, 1989. Right? And I just turned 27 years old. So what happened there, in 85, I got visited by a sergeant in the Toronto Division, and they asked me kind of kindly that, explain to me not everybody makes it to the station, and that maybe it would be in my best interest to leave. Well, that's how I interpreted what he was saying, and I kind of left that situation. So I came up to Vancouver in 87, and I'll go back over this when I talk about my experience going through the process, right? Because really making it an experience is what this is all about. So I came out here in 87 with an idea of changing my life. My life was burnt to the ground. I mean, it was beyond. I was 25 5 years old, and I was kind of puking green bile, dying of alcoholism, and all my efforts at that time was at that time it was 9 years in and out of the fellowship of AA. I was at a home group, the Queensway Saturday Night group, where my dry date was in pencil. Like 5 years at that group trying to get sober. I was in 12 and 12 studies, I was always introduced to the 12 and 12 study. When I got sober, the big book process wasn't really a part of the fellowship, as much as that may be hard to believe. It was all 12 and 12 in Novelco. So what happens is, when I came out here to start a new life, my brother was living out here, and I just went to meetings. I made 6 months and I relapsed. Then I went 3 months, relapsed. My last relapse, I went to 360 meetings in 90 days. April 6th, I just turned 27 years old. And I went to a meeting talking about how great I was doing keeping me sober. Nobody talks like that, right? Look how great I'm doing. It's my birthday today and I'm sober. And then I went back on Friday and talked about what a great job I kept myself sober on Thursday. Right, anybody? And then the next day, it was Saturday, I got a 3-month chip, and I talked like I was getting an Academy Award. I like to thank me, and I like to thank me, and I like to thank me. And I like to thank my girlfriend that is here and the one that isn't. Right? I'm 27. I am nuts. I left the meeting, an hour later, I was drinking. And I just did 360 meetings in 90 days. I was in 4, 12, and 12 studies. So, and if you ask me what the problem was, I didn't have a clue. And if you asked me why I relapsed, I had an excuse to it, right? And so I had 11 years of excuses why I was relapsed. So kind of what it breaks down to, I have 11 years of good enough reasons to come to AA. You know, the consequences that get our attention, we say something's got to change. So looking back, when I got introduced to this thing, the first thing I got out of a meeting was there was hope here. And I kind of tapped into that idea, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was being offered, but there was something with the idea that I didn't have to live the way I was living. Isn't that the idea? Like, I don't want to be living the way I'm living, feeling what I'm feeling, and my life looking the way it was looked bleak. Like, remember my first thinking of suicide attempt was like I was 15. I was standing up on a balcony of a building, 18th floor, and I was on peyote, a couple of hits of microdot, drink of Boilermakers. Wasted, just wasted. We're moving product back then with my cousins and stuff like that. And they were all partying in the other building, and I think I was just getting, the peyote was just starting to kick in. And I was standing there looking down at the dumpster, and it was kind of like, if this is going to be my life, it's over, right? Based on my experience of this far in life and where I was, it was kind of like the idea of my life continuously looking like this and the inability to already deal with life and what is kind of giving me, it is hot in here, right? I'm going to turn this down here. Or God showing up, I don't know, one or the other. It's always different when you're in a room full of men, right? You know, it's nice to have a couple of women available, that way you can fluff it up a bit, right? You get to, right? When it's all guys, you know, like everybody feels a little nervous when you're in a room full of guys, right? But you can kind of see the bullshit, right? So it's kind of like, I was kind of standing there thinking about this thing, and it's kind of really real when I was kind of go through this. At this point in time, 15, I just got out of a controlled environment, and I think I already had my first skin pop because my cousin stuck a needle in my ass when I passed out, and they gave me a skin pop. They hit me up with some methamphetamine, and I jumped up like a cat. It was like kind of wild. And in the environment I was in, it was kind of like the guys I got hooked in with, they're all left over from the 60s, right, and 70s, but they didn't know the 60s and 70s were over. I don't know if you ever partied with those guys, right? And I was like their pet project, right? So it was kind of like, look at this kid, right? But I didn't think, anyway, so get out of this environment, I'm hooked in with them because I have a knack for finding my own people. I don't know if anybody, I could be standing there minding my own business and 3 people like me will show up. Hey, what's happening, right? So he kind of, they would take pride to see how long they can keep me till I was passed out. How many shots, how many tokes, and then when I pass out on the floor, like the party isn't even started yet, and I'm out like a light on the floor, they'd be doing super tokes out my nose, laughing their head out, like laughing their ass off, right? I'd come to, and everybody would be standing around with drinks and laughing at me, right? So I got a soul purpose was to be the last one where I'd be laughing at them. I don't know if anybody's kind of motivated by resentment here, but I didn't know that was resentment. So I got really, really good at what I was doing, but I was already being driven by things that I didn't know I was being driven by. And my ability to assess situations was already working against me, but my inability to realize that. And I was making decisions based on stuff at that age that I didn't realize was working toward my demise. So it was kind of like, the best part about this thing is kind of like there's a magic here beyond our ability to see, feel, and touch. And by the time you become aware of it, you kind of go, whoa, you kind of seen it was always there. And when you hear people experience, you kind of, if you can tap in that there's an energy or there's a life force here, there's something working beyond our understanding. It's like I was telling my friend here, 7 days sober. For us, it's pretty amazing. When you look around this room and you look at the characters that are in here, the only time we ever get together like this is usually pre-trial, detox, and some hospital gathering or a car wreck, right? You kind of like, hey, that's usually how we get together, right? And we're sitting here on a weekend going through this thing in the condition we're in and hope and all that. It's pretty wild. So as I kind of got through this thing, I'll get my bearings on this, but when I started seeing the magic in this, it took other members for me to see it. So that means I spent 11 years in the fellowship of AA thinking I was in the program, thinking I was doing all the do things to get me sober, but I was missing the experience that happens in AA. So I was like the guy, went to the airport every day, and I talked to people who've been on the plane, and I look out the window and see the plane, and after a couple of days I'd talk like that was my experience of being on the plane. But I've never really took a flight, and that was kind of like my experience in AA. I talk about everybody else's experience, and I talked about it enough where I thought it was my experience, and then I kept on relapsing, right? So back when this magic was happening in my life before I even realized it was happening, there was always something kind of governing me or something deep down within that kind of gave me some direction without even me realizing. That gave me comfort, even from a young age when all the abuse and all the chaos was happening. I found comfort deep down within. I was able to shut myself off from the world, the beatings and all that other stuff. It was like I found this place within, like a refuge within inside of myself, but I never acknowledged that back then, or a voice that kind of gave me comfort, right? And it's kind of like when they talked about, I think about the different times where I'd like hit the floor and stuff would happen, or I'd come to in situations, or I'd be blacked out and passing out, and a voice would say, I don't even know where I was, where I am in it, but this voice would say, don't fall asleep on your back. Where the hell did that come from, right? Why? Because you die of asphyxiation, you end up vomiting. So I would turn over and fall asleep on my side, right? So stuff like that, but I never realized there was something governing in my life even way back then. And so the magic that happens in here, if you kind of, when you get through here, and it's pretty amazing when this thing comes alive for you, is that, and I'll kind of go all over the place here, but the theme is going to be kind of like this thing working in our lives without us realizing it. When you could kind of tap into it where it makes it personal for you, your whole life will never be the same again. And that's what they talk about, is the experience, not the knowledge of. But you need the knowledge to get the experience. So it's a catch-22, because if you don't know what the process is, then how can you experience the outcome of it? And how do you know you're there when you get there, right? It's like when you look at those travel agency packages, you know what to expect when you get there, right? And if you didn't see those places, none of those places were there, you'd know you're at the wrong place. That's kind of like recovery. This talks about a process, and then when we go through it, you kind of get, I see this landmark here, I'm experiencing it. I see this landmark here, I see this landmark here. And as a result of it, you could show somebody else that's coming behind you what you're doing to get you to where you are. Most of us don't know how to do that. And I was one of those people that talked about an experience that I never really had because I could fabricate stuff. I don't know if anybody chameleons here, but I could fabricate recovery, and it'd work until life happened. I don't know if anybody ever noticed that. I got a great program till something happens, right? It's called like conditional sobriety. As long as the conditions are right, I'm okay, right? So when I went through Bill's story, it was kind of really interesting that when you look at the history of this thing, Bill went through treatment 3 times. right? But his second time in treatment, he had that desperateness that what he wouldn't do to change his life. And we've all been there. We're lying in the room's closed by yourself, and you're thinking the incomprehensible demoralization, the pain, the existence, and the stuff you've done, and you can't believe you got there, and what you wouldn't do to change your life. There's got to be a different way of life. And this voice within inside that says there's something different for you than what you're experiencing. Every single one of us had that, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. Because if that voice wasn't present, I'd be dead by now, but I wouldn't have pursued a different life than the one I was living. So when Bill was in that situation and he heard the doctor talking to his wife, he kind of put this thing out to the universe that he wanted a different experience than what he was having. And the wording's quite optional, but he wanted something different than he was experiencing and his inability to achieve it. Right? Because it's the second time in treatment. Bill was a chronic relapser. Why? Because he didn't experience this thing that he had to experience upon his third time in treatment. But what even happens even before that, he was sitting at the kitchen table drinking, right? Dying of alcoholism. And at this stage, it's about 5 years he's trying to get sober. And Ebby showed up in Bill's life. Bill didn't call Ebby. Ebby called Bill. Got on a plane and carried a message to Bill. Even Bill couldn't fully comprehend what was being offered. He's seen it was available to him. He's seen the miracle sitting across the table. So he's seen this thing that was available to him, but he didn't know how to get it. He says he's had moments with it, but he didn't know how to obtain it. His friend promised when these things were done, if he did the same thing his friend did, he would have the same experience that he had. And then his third time in treatment, he went through a process that his friend took him through. He didn't go through it alone. Most of us, if you're anything like me, we try to do this alone. Genius type sobriety, I call it one-ply recovery. You know how good one-ply is, right? I don't know if you've ever used one-ply. I'm applying me to me and it's not turning out well. It's not working. And that's how most of my experience has been. But what's really funny is when I was in that incomprehensible demoralization, I couldn't create a change for any given period of time. And when I was 16, the phone rang. And at this time, I'm kind of like, I'm blasted. I'm drinking Boilermakers and a couple of hits again of LSD, and then I'm smoking some Thai stick, and I think got some peyote was big back then with a bit of methamphetamine to top everything off. It was like a really good time. And I'm just getting to that peak of like Yahoo, and then my mom let us have the place so I could party. And it was kind of like the phone rang. And when I picked up the phone, this guy goes, "Hey, is Tony.R.A.A. there?" And I said, "Yeah, by the way, I just found out what my real name was because we're living under an alias at that time. My last name was something else. I don't want to get into that right now, but seeing it's being taped, or leave it alone." So what happens is, so I just found out my name because I got my social insurance number, and that was a whole different story, and I'll get in a bit about that when I go through the 4 and stuff like that. And this guy goes, "Hey, yeah, do you know any other Tony.R.A.A.?" I said, like, "Who cares? Like, what's your problem, pal? It's my birthday today." And he says, "Well, this is Tony.R.A.A. I'm your dad." And now I'm thinking, is this really happening or is this not happening? Because the stories I heard about my dad, he was like ex-association, the war stories I heard about my dad, he was like this huge, unbelievable being that I always kind of thrived to be on the stories I heard about him and on and on and on. He says, "I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous." 2 things. I didn't understand what he meant by sober, and they don't understand what he meant by a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, "I'd like to get together with your family, you and your mom, to make amends." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know anything. All I knew is that my dad's in my life. My life's going to change. And I got a drinking buddy. That's all I heard is like, yeah, now I get to live the life I always hoped for. Now I have somebody, because there was really nobody. And this was going to be my my father figure, what I always strive for, because I've been in and out of controlled environments at that time from a young age. It was kind of like, yeah, he was going to be the person that made a difference in my life. And so when my mom came home, it was kind of like, told her, "Hey, this guy phoned, he says he's my dad." She says, "We're moving." That's it, we're out of here, right? Because the last time my mom seen him, he showed up in Hellebury with a gun trying to get me from my godmother where I was living at, and he was so loaded, they ended up giving him a mannequin doll and a blanket, and he took off with that, and he ended up getting So like that's welcome to my life, right? I come from a good gene pool, right? And you'll see after I'm doing really good for a guy in my mental condition. So I don't only suffer from my story, I suffer from my mom's story, my dad's story, and all their associations, right? They talk about the warpless count lives of blameless children. I grew up with their perspective of life. So I grew up very fear-based. I grew up with the understanding what we talked about here. You can be in a room full of people and you know nobody likes you, nobody wants you. What are you doing here anyways? I don't know if anybody has those kind of feelings and stuff like that. So I met him and I thought, I remember going to my mom. I said, I don't need you anymore. I got my dad. And I didn't realize how much of a knife that was to my mom because of my disassociation with emotion, feeling, and how it affects other people. So I met my dad. And what's really cool here, at that time, there was nobody in my life I could trust because everybody I ever got close to betrayed me in one way or another. And that goes right to my mom. Like when I was 8.5 years old, she was out doing her thing, and we grew up around mafia and ex-clubbers and stuff without getting into my mom's story because she's still alive and all that other stuff. But it was a really whacked out environment. Like I'd leave my room and the people in the rooming house that we rented out rooms to were whacking heroin back then with eyedroppers and stuff like that. And there's people coming in with fur coats and they were coming in with fridges in one area and out the other area. They were kind of in between a lot of things, and they help people get things, they help people get rid of things, and they help people, moving shakers. You know what I mean? They were my mentors, right? And so it was kind of like. So when I told her that, I thought, now I have this person, and I didn't realize how much emphasis I put on this person as being somebody. Finally, I have somebody in my life. And this is so I'm spending all this time going with my dad. I'm going to meetings. I start going to the church. I start trying to change my life. And I got a job probably at 17 at that time. I ended up being the youngest guy to ever get into Douglas Aircraft before the union, and I was really rebuilding my life. But I ended up getting a breach of probation because we were doing other things. Without getting into a long story, we're doing restaurant taverns. At that time, that's when the hinges were on the outside of the door. You could pop them off from the inside. Like from the outside, you pop the hinge off, take the door off, shut the alarm off, take the whiskey out, put the door back on, put the hinges on, and leave. I was doing that kind of stuff when I was 15, 16. And rolling stuff and getting rid of stuff and buying, helping people move stuff and stuff like that. So as an entrepreneur at a really young age, right? So my dad, who became my kind of hero and my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous, I ended up getting a breach of probation. And I didn't know how significant this was till much later in my life. And we'll talk about that when we get into 6 and 7, how some of this stuff is really deep and you don't know how deep it goes until life goes on. You kind of, it's like opening up an old box that's in the closet and go, holy smokes, I didn't even realize that was there, right? So I ended up getting a breach of probation. And I had to go to court to explain to them the reason I have a breach of probation is because I just met my dad and I'm hanging out with him. I'm going to church, I'm going to AA and all this other stuff. I'm recreating my life and I am doing community services. And he's going to talk about that because I'm helping him with the Christmas toy drive and I'm involved in the church. And so when I had this thing happening for trial, my dad said, don't worry about it. I'll come and represent you. Right? And I didn't think about it then, but I showed up at trial and I had his life story in my hand, right? And I was so proud of my dad, and he was going to come. Finally, somebody was going to represent me, and he didn't show up. And I remember showing the judge my dad's life story. And I put it on the thing, and he pushed it aside because the story wasn't worth nothing because there was no representation to the story, right? And that was most of my life. There was no representation to what I was trying to present or trying to be. I wasn't able to exhibit that when it came down to it, right? So I ended up getting 3 months in jail. I lost a job, I lost everything. But what really happened then was I didn't realize that a deep-seated place, I shut off all connection to all people. I couldn't depend on nobody. My mom always kind of trained us that way, is like, I might not come home. So you and your sister got to look after yourselves. We learn how to cook for ourselves. We learn how to look after ourselves because she always said you need to be self-sufficient because of the lifestyle and what was happening. She says, I might not come back one day. And that sets a real fear-based kind of understanding and non-disclosure and the secrets that were happening in the home back then. We couldn't discuss it. So it was a really warped kind of idea. and presentation to life. Like I could show up and be a worker for a little while, right? Get the job and show up and do the show and shine, but then I would show up shortly afterwards. And these conditions in my mind would always create things sober, not always drinking, right? Well, like when I got that job at Douglas Aircraft, is this guy never did nothing. He was the foreman's son. So I was resentful at him and didn't even know it. And this guy told me he was the foreman's son. And every day I seen him, I was resentful at this guy. And he's smiling and whistling. And I'm thinking, you son of a... And he's living his life. And he walked by one day and I spit on the floor in front of him. Like that's kind of mentality that I'd create this delusion in my head that I believe was true. And then I'd act on it, causing myself problems. And other things happened there when I lost that job and I went back to make amends. It was kind of like they had on my file not to be hired under any conditions, right? Big red seal on it, right? I didn't know whether to be proud of that moment or ashamed when they opened my file, right? So at that moment I shut off again, and I didn't realize that until much later, like when I got in with George and these guys. So I was trying to combat a problem I didn't understand, with a solution that didn't make any sense. But I was able to be a chameleon so well that I'm a mover. Like I always learned at a young age, when something gets too hot one place, you move to another place. You just do that. I didn't make decisions. It was, what's the alternative? Stay here. I never learned how to stay anywhere. I was always leaving. So like if foster cares, all that stuff, I learned at a young age, in order to I would get the same feeling from looking at a picture than I would being with a person. I learned all my relationships were based on picture-based. When I had a lonely feeling, miss my mom, miss my sister, I'd look at their picture, and that would be my relationship with the idea of these people, right? And then it got to a place where I just wouldn't even look at the picture. My story is so mixed up, I don't even know most of it, because I just go from one situation to another situation to another situation, from one group of friends to another group of friends. And I didn't know like the disassociation of my life. So when I came into AA and I was trying to get sober, I would do the surrender thing, what I thought it meant. I would do the acceptance things, what I thought it meant. I would do sobriety as I thought it meant, right? I didn't understand what it meant. And that's really important for people like us, right? So long story short, I'm trying to get sober. I keep on relapsing all the time, and I'm meeting these good members, think it through, don't take the first one. If you go to a party, hang on to a ginger ale. I don't know if anybody's heard that advice. It works good till you forget why you're doing it. I went to this party, and I think this is before the Army. I went to this party, and the guy says, I was really concerned about going to this party. He says, well, make sure you hang on to a drink all night. And I said, okay, makes sense. And if anybody asks you if they want to drink, just say there wouldn't be enough for both of you. What a way to combat alcoholism. I said, I found a solution for alcoholism, right? So I show up at this party all night. You know how we are with a glass, right? Ask me what's in the glass, right? So these guys are walking out, like pointing like it's a big deal, we're not drinking. Normal people don't do that stuff, right? So people are all night. I kind of exhausted that saying, whatever, if I started, it wouldn't be enough for both of you. It was 11:15. I was sitting on the couch. I remember exactly that point in time. The guy sat down after afternoon shift. He goes, hey, what are you drinking? I said, oh, ginger ale. He says, well, why don't you have a beer? I said, oh, no, if I started, it wouldn't be enough for both of us. He says, I got 6 flats in the back. I kind of went, I guess there would be enough. I staggered out of that place 5 in the morning, right? And if you ask me why, because there were 6 flats, right? And it seemed like the right thing to do because I didn't understand the problem. And so when I went back to this meeting, the guy goes, how did it go? I said, it was doing great till the guy told me he had 6 flats, and I realized there would be enough for both of us. And he goes, and he just looked at me kind of horrified, right? So he goes, you know what your problem is, son? Because I'm like 17 years old, 18 years old, right? He goes, you know what your problem is? You lack discipline. Which makes sense why I'm getting drunk all the time, and based on my life history and where I come from and all this. So yeah, I lack discipline. Like I have a lot of psychological problems. I got introduced to therapy at junior kindergarten. I have report cards. We look very interested in Tony's development, right? With keen understanding. Like I was getting my first suspension was in junior kindergarten for 2 weeks for splitting a guy's chin open with a chair, right? So right off the hop, like I was socially unacceptable everywhere I went, and that story goes on and on until I became a custody of the children's aid ward, right, for punching the choir teacher in the head for trying to take my president. I used to black out all the time, right? So when you touched me, I was just bam, I guess I hit her, and 4 teachers came and dragged me out of the classroom, and I'm trying to figure out what happened. That's most of my story. What happened? Right? They're dragging I'm like upside down, and they're carrying me out, and she's up in the class like on a thing, and she has a big shiner, and all the kids are up against the wall screaming. I'm saying, what went on here? So, anyways, So I thought, yeah, it makes sense, discipline. So I thought, where would a guy get discipline? I'm drinking, of course. I mean, anybody come up with the best ideas drinking here? So I'm drinking. I think, where would a guy come up with discipline? I said, the Army. I said, oh my God, that's the perfect place for a guy like me. Grew up in the streets of Toronto, mostly custody of the children's aid ward most of my life, in and out of situations, on and on and on. The people I associated with were, let's say, different than most people. And so I joined the Army. But what's really funny is, because I didn't understand the problem, I ended up meeting a lady at the recruiting office who was doing the same thing. You ever meet these wonderful ladies in these strange situations and you're like magnets for each other, anybody? And it's kind of like true love. So she looked at me, I looked at her, we bought us 26 and we went to the movie theater. We consummated that relationship right there. She was perfect. I can't even remember her name. So we're hanging out a bit, and she goes, why don't you come over for dinner? Which is kind of interesting. So I go back to the Sagamore and the guys I'm hanging around with. I said, this chick asked me for dinner out in the suburbs. I've never been asked for dinner anywhere in the suburbs, but that whole thing, come out to dinner, like that wasn't a part of my lifestyle. So I go to my buddy and say, what are you supposed to do? Like, supposed to go to this dinner thing with this girl. She lives out in the suburbs with her parents and all that stuff. She says, well, you're supposed to bring a bottle of wine and present it as you go to the door. I thought, wow, that's cool, eh? So I go to the liquor store unsupervised with my own thinking. And I'm thinking, what's a nice bottle of wine? So I start looking at the alcohol content. That's very important. You start with the alcohol content, right? And sugar content, and then you look for sales and convenience. So I seen this bottle of baby duck. 1.5 liters. I kind of went, whoa. Like I had that moment, because I already, like, you can't get the ones with the cork in it. Nothing worse than sticking the pen in it and trying to pour it out. It just doesn't work. The cap, it has the gold cap. Anybody remember the gold cap? So I take this because we're going to go meet our friends after. So this is just for dinner. So I take it down and I have a proud moment, like I'm holding a baby, all right? And I'm walking to the counter like that. And then the thought crossed, like from here to there, where the counter is, the cashier is, the thought crossed my mind, maybe there's other people there that want to drink. I go back and grab another 1.5 liter of wine. I got 3 liters of wine for dinner. Now, I'm proud of myself. I think this is awesome. I get on my bike, and I'm on my leather coat, and I got these total gold caps sticking out of and I'm going up to 400 to go visit. And I'm looking down at these caps, and I'm very proud of the situation I'm in. Now, the idea that they're in my coat on a motorcycle flying up the highway doesn't concern me in the least. Like, when I think about that now, it's kind of like, what the? So I show up with her, I knock on the door, she opens the door, and she just goes, and I go, yeah, eh? No, it wasn't that kind of look. She goes, you do know we're going out for dinner after. I said, yeah, this is just for dinner, right? Because I'm leaving the next day on a plane to Cornwallis. Now, the funny thing is, I got a hair like this. I got an afro that's huge, right? I'm just turned, I think, before my 19th birthday. This is just before Christmas, because they were having Christmas events. I remember that. So we have dinner. I couldn't tell you what was dinner. I couldn't tell you what a place was. I guess I drank a lot. We went to the bar, the suburb bar. I never drank in one of those places, and they're all preppies and all that other stuff, and I'm wearing a nice dress shirt. As I started drinking, my sleeve started going up. Right? Now my sleeve's up over here. I'm drinking zombies, eh? And they don't make enough By law, they're only allowed to put 3 shots in it, so you got to go see another bartender to put another shot in it. Nobody drinks like that here, right? I'm drinking. These zombies are the best thing that ever happened to me. And so I don't even know what's happening in the environment I'm in. And I just finished talking. She goes, what's the matter with you? And I leaned over and I said, you know, when I get like this. She goes, what? I said, you know what I like to do? She goes, what? And she's looking straight for me. I said, there's 2 things. One of them's fighting. What are we doing? And the other one was producing kids, right? Just my mentality. That's my mentality because I'm ready to go. It's either if you're not leaving with a woman, you're fighting. I don't know if anybody's like, you got to get that adrenaline going, right? So I'm walking in and that song came out. We're off to the rodeo. But yeah, I don't know. I never heard that song before. Where I hung out, they weren't singing those songs. The whole bar was singing the song, and this guy walks by me and goes, effing jerk, right? And I said, what did you say? Perfect, right? He goes, no. So that was my mentality. So there's the 2 conversations I remember the whole night. 3 conversations. Her, how much wine you got? Me explaining my situation to her, that guy, and then I come to going down the 400 highway in her car. And I don't know if it was kilometers or miles then, but I remember her kind of screaming because I was in her car. Oh, and by the way, I'm driving. So that's an important factor here. I come to in this car and I look at the speedometer and I remember it's going 120. And that was back in I guess, 79, 2000, no, so 1980. So I don't know if it was kilometers or miles, who cares? But I went into blackout again. And then I came to on the floor of her bathroom buck naked because there's tile floors. Anybody like tile floors here? It brings your body temperature down. Anybody? That's how I look for apartments back then was tile floors, check. Take it. Never mind the view. Where's the liquor store? Where's the beer store? And how close the sink was to the toilet. Very important. It takes away all decisions then of what end goes where. And I don't know if normal people get apartments like that, right? Tile floor. And you're happy about this. I don't know how many times I've woken up on other people's floor, buck naked. When I think about opening the door, whack, and I'm trying to remember where you are. Anyways, never mind what happened. So I come to on her in the bathroom floor, and I look at in the corner, and it's red. Like, I mean red. And I'm trying to figure what, I'm thinking, why I'm sick is not the amounts of drink, it was the grenadine. The grenadine made me sick, not the alcohol. So I ended up on a plane. I had a black eye. I got in a fight with somebody at a base somewhere else on the flight, whatever. I mean, they set me up on this plane, and now I realize who it was. It was a lieutenant and a captain. I'm sitting up in the set, and I'm sitting between them. I got an afro like this. I'm smelling like vomit. I got a black eye. I got biker boots on and a leather coat. They go, where are you going, son? I said, I think in boot camp. And they go, sorry. This guy from Toronto, never experienced anything like this in my life. You know, they tell you what to do all the time, not just for 8 hours. Somebody lied to me, right? So I did the 10 weeks. And then I went to Wainwright, Alberta. And now I'm still, don't know what the problem is. But I still got this thing happening in my head. But I'm playing the role. I'm in the infantry and things are great. I passed the top of my field. I'm getting ready to go to Germany and Cyprus. Right, I'm top of my field in everything I'm doing, right? I'm in the infantry and things are fine. But there's a problem with the people in my barracks. They're all farmers. They never grew up and they all have a problem with me. I don't know if it's true, but I know they all have a problem with me and they're setting me up and they're doing things and blah, blah, blah. Anybody have that kind of mind? And the more they're smiling at me, I'm thinking, yeah, you think it's funny, eh? They never did nothing to me. But I got a list of people, eh? Okay. And they put stuff in my kit. And I was just nuts. So I went on, I kept on going on these drunks there. But I didn't know I was going on these drunks because it was 40 cents a shot. So I spent $1.20 on a drink called Tequila Sundowns. It was vodka, rum, and tequila in a tall glass with orange juice. I call them Tequila Sundowns. I drink $20 worth of those and then go into town. Blackout most of the time, don't even know what's happening. So I'm starting to puke blood at this time. Don't realize I'm doing it. I'm trying to get to the bar, and I got this burning in my stomach. Like, it's really bad. Like, I'm 20, now I'm 21. Been in there 2 years and getting ready to go to cyber. I got this burning in my stomach, and I'm puking blood, and I'm trying to think what I ate the night before that would cause that to happen. I don't know if you get I don't know if you've ever had the gift of bile showing up with blood in it. It kind of really makes you, and especially in the snow in Wainwright, like it's just chunky, right? And so I remember this one time I'm trying to get to the bar, and I'm getting black dots, which I understand is a seizure now. I didn't understand that then. I remember this lady coming out, you okay? And all blood and shit like that, right? She closed the door and locked it, right? And I'm thinking, if I could just get a couple shots, if I could just get a couple drinks, I'll be okay. So I drank those and kept on getting resentful at these people. Now, we're amazing people for getting out of trouble here. Anybody have come up with stories even amaze you? So I'm getting marched to jail quite often now, and it's your own sergeant, and your own master corporal, and your own guys watch you while you're in jail, and they don't like the idea of having to watch you in jail and still do their kit and their routine the next day and all that stuff. So it's like a group punishment. What they do is try to get you in order. So it's your platoon that kind of, it's a public shaming and discipline through your platoon members. So I'm getting more pissed off at them. So near the end, I ended up loading up an FNC1 with blanks. Because collectively I had to make them all pay, right? Because that's the way I grew up, is about getting even. So when we both think about each other, neither one of us laugh as much. I don't know if anybody, oh yeah, I was there. So I'm sitting there on emptying an amnesty box. I don't know if that's where you put live rounds and blanks. I'm pissed with 3 of my buddies. I've been on a drunk, right? We just came back from the war games at that time. So I'm emptying this box with live rounds and blanks in it. I can hardly see. And I take my magazine and I pass it around. 3 critical thinking people helped me determine that there was no live ammunition in the thing. I thank them very much for their participation. And then I had my rifle. There was nothing in the chamber. And then I took 3 pissed people. Yep, they're blanks. Passed them around. We all agreed they were blanks. And I loaded them into the magazine. And as I'm doing that, I'm laughing. Because I came home early from the drinking in Wainwright before they did. And I sat on the bed with an FNC1 loaded with blanks, and they came in, all of them, 2 cabs worth. And I said, hey, remember what I told you? They see me with the weapon, they went, and I dropped down on one knee and I let them have it. Now, nobody found that nowhere as funny as I did. Nobody in the whole platoon, because it's like a Gomer Pyle platoon. I didn't realize an impact like that from the inside of a building would kind of have the whole camp on alert. You ever hear a firecracker go off in the neighborhood? Imagine it from the inside of a barracks. 3 live rounds from an FNC1. It went off so loud it scared the shit. It scared me. So I had to explain my thinking to the lieutenant and the commander of the base. How the hell am I going to get out of this? So I said, well, I've been going through a hard time, see, because the girl that I wasn't engaged to, I was engaged to now. And that she was pregnant. And she was going out with my best friend. None of it's true. And I'm living it, man. I'm living this story. And my mom just ended up in the hospital. She's in bad state, and I don't know how to deal with those. But if you can give me a bit of time off, I'll go take care of all that stuff. I was out the following week. They gave me a 4C release, and I was out of there. So I left there trying to get sober, and I didn't get sober, and my life continued to spiral out of control. And then, so I got out of there. I was 22. Try to get sober, situations happen, and a lot of more violence started happening, a lot more uncontrollable situations happened, a lot more unforeseen things started happening. My sober life, I was hardly ever sober, unless even when I came to meetings, I was hooked on something, and then what happened was I got into a fight with my best friend. I nearly killed him in a fight, and that's the truth. He he studied martial arts for a while. He got drunk and he wanted to fight me outside of a bar, and I didn't want to fight him. And then I ended up fighting. What happened is I ended up bringing his head off a parking meter, and I split him open between the eye and the temple, and he fell on the ground. And I didn't think nothing of it. I just called a cab, put him in the cab, asked the cab to stop at 7-Eleven so I can get some rolling papers, get my priorities straight, right? I took him out of the cab. I left him on the driveway of the basement suite I was living at, on the driveway. Left him there, went and made a drink. Came back up and asked him what his problem was. I said, let's go. So I'm trying to help him get to my place, and I'm hanging on to a drink. And my brain said, well, I can't hang on to a drink and help you down the stairs. So I said, you okay? He says, yeah. And I let him go. And he fell down the stairs, right? And like, when I think about that, who does that, right? And I never thought of that. I just grabbed him by the scuff of the collar and I dragged him into the kitchen floor. I left him there, took what was left of the 40 ouncer, went to bed like I usually do, put what was left of the 40, and I passed out, woke up in the morning, grabbed the 40, and I started drinking it, and I was trying to put together the night before. I grabbed a gram of hash, and I rolled 2 joints out of it, one to go to the bathroom and one to wake up with. I used to get 2 joints out of a gram of hash. I used to smoke a quarter gram of hash back then. I was moving a lot of stuff. And it was just a function, right? And then I went, oh yeah, Louis here, right? I said, oh no, I thought he would be as happy to see me as I was being to see him. And then because I didn't remember what happened the night before. And I went into the kitchen and there was vomit on one side of him and blood on the other. And I kicked him and I said, get up, pup, let's get going, right? Something came over me at that moment where I realized I turned into the animal that I always was despised. I turned into my dad without even realizing. I went and spit at my own image in the mirror and tried to wash my face with the cold water. I don't know if you ever got that, the embarrassment. And I couldn't get any relief. I was spitting at my own image like I couldn't believe what I turned into. That episode kept me sober for 16 months, alcohol-free. Every time I thought about a drink, I thought about him. And that kept me sober. But I was still smoking a quarter hash a day to function, because when I got sober, the ghost of yesterday would come back. I think that guy who did the Christmas Story was actually an alcoholic with the chains. Oh, you're going to be visited by 3 ghosts. If it was just 3 ghosts, that wouldn't be bad. For some of us, it's a whole bus, right? They're getting off the bus. They're going to, and so I had this nightmare that I couldn't deal with when I was sober. So what happens is I was sitting in a situation. Somebody offered me a drink because I didn't understand the problem or the solution available. And someone said, hey, you want a little something for your coffee? And at that time, it was 1985, right? And I said, yes. It was April 6th, 1985. She put that shot in my coffee. What I understand now triggered the phenomenon of craving. And I ended up in Vancouver in 87. By the time I ended up in Vancouver at that time, had federal, provincial charges. The people who were vetting me at the time told me not to come around anymore. They told me there was something psychologically wrong with me. And maybe I should go back to AA. And I got to a place where I'm vomiting green bile and I can't stay sober. And I'm more violent sober than I am drinking. So I end up in Vancouver and trying to get sober. And then what happens is a guy, just after, he was trying to get me into a big book study workshop. And I told him it's okay, I know what not to do after my relapse. And so what he did was, a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, he saved my life. He said, why don't you come out and help us out? So I'll see you next Tuesday. Right? So I'm under the impression, this is how sick I am, right? I'm under the impression these guys really need my help, because he says, you've been around a long time. I said, yeah, this time 11 years, in and out. He says, and I'm doing 4 12 and 12 studies. I'm helping people go through a process I have no idea about. But they don't know I don't know, and so we all don't know together, and it sounds good. We're all sitting there going, and watching, just shifting rooms on that Titanic. Anybody do that? That's what AA is without treatment. You just shift rooms in the Titanic, you get a better room, you think you're in recovery. You're saying on the same vessel, right? So they put me in a big book study workshop. They took me through this thing, and the rest of this thing will be talked about my experience going through the steps with my story and how I got relief from that, and how I have the freedom and the life I have today, the experience that has me free from this thing. Because I've never met anybody in the last 29 years who's ever gone through this, including me, who's ever gone through this the way it's laid out and who's maintained it, who's ever relapsed. Not one person. I've met a lot of people who do versions of this, who do other people's idea of this, but never done this. Right, so by the end of the weekend, hopefully we can have some ideas, and that's what these sheets are. You can go through that on your own time. Well, you have some earmarks of what you're looking for and the idea of it, and if you have an open mind, I'll share with you what will share with me and the experience of me going through it and what my life looks like today. So I'm really thrilled about the idea of going through this. That's the beauty about this thing is we're more thrilled for you than you are for you. Right? You ever notice why we clap when newcomers are there? There's another one. You guys come in going, holy shit, that was putting out the flames. Woo! Right? We go, wow, right on. Is when you come in here like this, I'm back. No, you're not. When you come back, it's like, whoa. It's like, and that's it. Like, we're thrilled to see you, honest to God, because the experience that awaits you is far better than anything you could ever imagine. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here doing this. Like these guys who've been sober a while, their life today far outweighs anything they could ever imagine. They have a different story. We got a better story for you than you got for you. I got a better story for me than I could have ever planned. I got the story of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not my story. It's Alcoholics Anonymous story, what it does for a guy like me. And like I could be here for the next 3 days talking about what it was like, right? My mom gave me Valiums when I was a kid to put me to sleep so they can go party. The abuse, the beatings, I mean on and on and on. None of that, like, where they talk about those two who suffer from grave emotional mental disorders. One of the two is going to show up this week. Both of us show up, right? I should say, I like to, we are alcoholic, right? Because there's a whole bunch of it. But I have a freedom today that's pretty amazing. And by the end of the weekend, hopefully you get as much out of this as I do. Thanks a lot.